Hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us today. I'm John Kleist III, a Sophia evangelist based in the United States. And it's with great pleasure I would like to introduce our presenter today, Mr. Paul Collins. He is CEO here at SkillsTX, has been intimately involved in the growth of Sophia over the last few years, particularly with Australia and New Zealand bringing countrywide licenses on board. Sophia might be a new term to some of you, but I'm sure Paul will be touching a bit upon our lovely friend Sophia and the framework that she is. With that, Paul, I'm going to pass things over to you, and we'll get you started.
Really appreciate that, John. Thank you very much for the introduction. And as John mentioned, I'm down here in the Antipodes. So again, welcome to everyone wherever you are in the world, and thank you for attending today. I'm going to take us through the next sort of half hour. There's going to be a live presentation, but I've got a few slides just to get us into the event itself. Always good to start with an agenda, so this will tie in with what you've already seen. We're just going to look at the current situation and why we put this webinar together in the first place. And we're also just going to touch on frameworks and a little bit of terminology as well. That's just going to help us as we move into live presentation. So one of the things that we're going to cover very early on is use of a framework to document a skill inventory. And how we can use that skill inventory to make good decisions. One of the things in a normal environment is that skill inventory is mapped or compared against the skills that you need now and into the future. And that's going to be a really key point as I go through this. We obviously need to keep that data up to date so that when we do need to make decisions, depending on what the current situation is, we're making it on good data that's up to date. So I'm going to be actually showing that sort of for real, using SkillsTX as the basis for it. But a lot of the takeaways from today will be around using a good solid skill inventory with consistent language to make good decisions from. Okay, we've all seen the headlines, so just to highlight a couple of things here. Certainly since the beginning of the year, very high in the press has been the layoffs around, the real big players here, the very, very big numbers. It is just one of those periods of time where obviously a lot of people were taken on, and then when economic situations change, we have these very, very key workers called digital professionals, but also they come with a price tag. So that obviously is a way that organizations balance the books, so to speak. We just look at that, and this is a really telling graph. We can see that during the pandemic there, everything really slowed down. Obviously people were resigning as we saw again with some of those stories in the press, but we can see this real uptick towards the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023. It does seem to be easing off a little bit right now, but it does tell us that the economic situation has changed. We hear every day about inflation, etc. So part of the story is about making good decisions when there's an economic challenge. However, there's a real good news side to this, which continues. And in my conversations over the last few days with clients, there is still absolutely a digital skill shortage. So whilst on one hand, we're seeing these big headlines, generally, certainly with regard to the World Economic Forum figures, there is still this underlying skill shortage, particularly around digital skills. And we can see some of the key areas on the slide there. So overall, still a skill shortage across the world. A little bit of terminology. Don't want to get too controversial here, but really just going to help us with the rest of the presentation. And I'd be quite open here that some of the conversations that I've had, obviously can't mention the names of the organizations, but ones where they have actually seen a reduction in headcount. It's been pretty much a spreadsheet exercise, almost just looking down at job titles or roles and just making those decisions. You know, we need 6 less of these type of people. But a job or a role title does not define the skills of a person. And when somebody leaves an organization, they take the skills with them. So just using that is a very, very blunt instrument. The other thing that I think is worth covering, and for those people that are on the call that know about the skills framework for the information age, this is not going to come as a surprise, but I know not everyone has got that intimate knowledge of Sophia. But you know, we variously here, you know, you ask somebody, do you have an inventory of your skills? Oh, yeah, we do. You look at it and you've got a list of things like JavaScript and ServiceNow and all these types of technologies. And whilst that's very important, it's not a skill, it's a piece of technology or a methodology, etc. So saying something like JavaScript expert, it's an indicator, but it certainly is not a skill. It doesn't really tell me too much. When we actually do look at a skill, so this is actually a description directly from the Sophia framework. So we have a name, programming software development, a 4-character code, a 1-sentence description of what it is, and then some detailed descriptions across the various levels. And I'll touch on that shortly. But here you can see what we would consider to be a description of a skill. So you can see level 4 of programming. I won't bother reading it out. You can obviously read that. But I'm going to then just take that one step further, that we don't have a binary view of skills, and neither should we do. It's not, you know, do you have programming at level 4, yes or no? There's way more to it. A skill takes time to develop. So you can see down at the bottom there, we make a point that skills are not binary. You don't go from not having the skill to suddenly have the skill. So we recognize that there's this journey which starts with knowledge, moves through proficiency, which is, you know, you've done it a few times and maybe with some support and oversight, and competency. Ultimately, basically, you can consider that you have fully developed that skill with nothing else to learn. Just a little bit of a shout out for Sophia itself. For those that don't know it, it is the de facto framework for defining digital competencies across the world. It's in many, many languages. So for those of you that don't have English as your first language, chances are it's already been translated into you know, your language. I think we're up to around 12 at the minute, but don't quote me on that, but certainly quite a few. That's just a quick view of the framework. It's broken down into these things that we call categories, but I'm going to look at that in a bit more detail for you now. If you do want to download anything, again, bit of a shout out to Sophia here, so you can scan that QR code or make a note of the URL, and there's a lot of this information just freely available for you to use. In terms of the categories, just to ease navigation, there's 121 skills described across the framework, broken down into those 6 categories. And I said, those really just help us with navigation. I do make a very, very strong point whenever I talk about Sophia, because it very often gets associated as a technology type framework. And for sure, there's a lot of technical type skills in there, but it is a very, very broad framework. It includes a lot of skills around, as you can see, people and skills, so HR type skills, governance skills, etc., etc. So it isn't all about machine learning and coding. It is much, much broader than that. The 7 levels of responsibility that you can see over on the right hand side there, it's one of the dimensions within the framework. Sort of aligns with career development, starting with level 1, you know, the sort of intern graduate type skills where you're mainly following instructions, and running right through to the very senior levels within organizations that are setting strategy and mobilizing the resources. So I'm not going to say any more about Sophia. I'm going to move across into a live demo, which means I'm just going to stop sharing these slides for a second and reshare my screen. So just bear with me while I do that. Okay. So What I'm going to do here is use a fictional character, Raphael, that you can see on the screen there. And I'm going to use Raphael as our linchpin in all of this, in terms of looking at it from the point of view of an individual, but also obviously looking at it from the point of view of the decision makers that are looking at their organization, how they might need to restructure based on, say, economic situation. So what we've got here is Raphael has been through a self-assessment. I'm not going to go through that. It's a one-off. It's an initial data capture. And once that process has taken place, we're then into maintaining the data. So what you can see here, a little bit of information. So this is business as usual. Raphael is currently the manager of the program office, and a 54% match, as you can see in the middle of the page there. And some, very high ambitions there to become the chief information officer, and obviously a much lower match at this point in time. Across the top of the page, we've got this 1, 2, 3 guidance. So I'm not going to turn this into a full product demo. I'm actually looking at this from seeing the data and how we're going to use it. So right away, we've got some good information here. If you remember the agenda, we've got the skills of the individual against the framework, Sophia, and now we've assigned a requirement, in this case, a current and future role to Raphael, and he can track his progress. And obviously maintain an action plan, as we can also see over here on the right-hand side. So that's Raphael managing his career development in conjunction with his manager to improve that percentage match and work towards his future role. So all about retention and employee experience. Scroll down a bit and let's get into some of the actual detail itself. So this is the skill inventory that we're looking at here. So the top of the page, for those people that are familiar with Sophia, we have these 5 generic attributes. They're exactly what it says. They're generic, so everyone has all 5 of these at one of those 7 levels. And if I look at this, just highlighting the framework again, we can see here that Raphael has got autonomy at level 5, which is the solid shaded box, and you can see what that description is. Of course, I can also look at what level 6 is, etc. Scroll down, and back to my point about not being binary, you can see in the skill profile key here, we've got competent, proficient, and knowledge, and a description of what those mean. And then a bit further down with the same indicators, I've now got a very visual representation of Raphael's skills. So I can see that he's competent in consultancy at level 4 and that he has proficiency at level 5. So all of this is a very good description of Raphael's capabilities. And what I'm now going to do is just overlay Raphael's current role, which is manager of the program office. And what we're immediately seeing here is, first of all, there are some skills that match. You can see a green tick sort of box there, a circle. We've got an amber circle, which is indicating that there's a partial gap for a desirable skill against his job. But you can also see the red one there, which is telling us that we've got a skill gap against required skills. And for the eagle-eyed, you'll actually notice that there are some skills here that don't have anything alongside, and those are skills that Raphael has that aren't currently required in his role. And that's a really key point that I'm going to come back to later. And this is really back to what we said at the beginning, that we want to know the skills that Raphael has got in their entirety, not just the skills that relate to his job. And that will become very important if we do start to make decisions, rather than just using this sort of spreadsheet approach of, looking at job titles and deciding we need less of that particular job title. Okay. I'll just switch that off. A couple of other things, again, with regard to making sure that this data is maintained and accurate. So first of all, the ability, in fact, I'll use this 1, 2, 3, to create an action plan. And as a result of those actions, there will be changes to the skill profile. not necessarily immediately, but as you go through training and you practice a skill, and you get the opportunity to use it more and more, you develop skills, and those would then be added into your skill profile. So whenever we make a decision, that should be up to date. So this action plan down here provides us the ability to do the gap analysis, and we can just add actions to address skill gaps. So one way to keep the data current. The other thing that we have that is an important aspect of the reliability of the data is to provide evidence to support those skills. So a couple of options here, a certificate, digital credential, and a badge that's been issued that support the skills. So again, helping us make sure that when we do make decisions, that data is accurate. I'm just going to go back to the skill profile, just highlight one other aspect of this, which is an important part of it. Notice down here, I've got the ability to request approval. So the point being that we don't just allow somebody to create a profile and just assume that's going to be it. We can have this collaboration with management, whereby they can look at the profile, and if Raphael requested approval, that would prompt the leadership to look at that profile and approve it, and it would be stamped accordingly with the date and time, and then if it's edited, it will be unapproved and require reapproval. So again, always got that view of the data being up to date. So what we've looked at here is Raphael's skill profile, how we'll be using it in a day-to-day environment to improve his skill profile against the requirements. But what I'm now going to do is switch over and have a look at it from the point of view of what this webinar is all about. We're seeing some economic challenges and headwinds. Some decisions might need to be made about the structure of our teams and how we might go about making those decisions. So I'm going to come at this from the point of view of, say, what often happens. You know, we need less at this particular type of role, and we just go and look at the people that's got that role, and that's how the decision's made. Just come into our analytics here, and the first one is employee experience. That's obviously very much about retention and engagement with your workforce. I'm just going to have a look at one of our other analytics. And I'm going to do this from the point of view of seeing who we've got that has a particular role. Okay, so just going to pick one here. That's always nice to look at because it bounces around the screen. So I'm just going to play a scenario here. And actually, this isn't that far away from reality. So we've got some challenges. We need to restructure our organization, make some decisions around that. We've maybe downgraded the programs that we're running, just from a degree of caution. So that might require or mean that we need less program managers. So I'm just going to type in here program, and it's done a search for me. And it's come up with 2 requirements. These are probably roles, and I can see here manager, program office, program director going to stay in place. But let's have a look at who we've got here. Okay, so we've got 2 people that currently fill that role, and that's really all. I've now got 2 names that are, you know, part of the decision making. However, as we said at the beginning, or as I said at the beginning, a role does not describe skills. It's the skills that are required to perform a particular delivery task or whatever. But it doesn't tell me what skills Raphael has or Jody. What it does tell me is what their job title is. So, got 2 candidates here, maybe that looking within the organisation for something different because we need less program managers. But I'm now just going to go back and have a look at another key aspect of this, which is knowing the skills of these individuals can change the way that we look at how we make those decisions. So I'm going to come in here to another view of the data. And this is a little bit close to home, actually, in terms of the scenario that we've selected here. This organization has a legacy system, and I know, again, this is actually certainly true in some of the financial institutes, and that legacy system is written in COBOL. Now, of course, there will be people that are in the development team that have COBOL skills, but it is, you know, a critical risk factor for the organization. So I can come in here and say, okay, what we actually need to protect is that legacy system. The skill that's required is programming, but I'm actually interested in people that's got COBOL. Okay, and guess what? I've got one person in the organization here that's got that skill, and it's Raphael. So with literally just a couple of clicks, I've gone from potentially making a very, very risky decision because Raphael is the program office manager, to actually realizing that actually Raphael, it could be the backfill if we need some COBOL skills. I'm going to flick over and actually look in a little bit more detail over here in Raphael's skill profile. And if I scroll down here, I can actually see here it is. So programming, identified COBOL. Of course, Sophia is agnostic, so Sophia doesn't care about COBOL. We obviously have a view that that extra level of information is particularly important. So you can see here all of the programming language that this organization is interested in, and the only one that Raphael is selected is COBOL. So I know for those younger people on, they're probably wondering what I'm talking about. It's a programming language from back in the day, and it's still around. So, and now I'm going to do what I did previously, which is overlay the current role. And just to prove the point, when I come down here, you can see we've got programming as a skill, but it's not indicated as a gap or anything else because it isn't required clearly in a program office manager. So that's really is giving that additional level of information that when we're making decisions, whatever those decisions may be, some of them may be very positive in terms of allowing people to pivot their careers within an organization. It might well be that we still need less program office managers, but other opportunities in the organization based on the skills of the individual might allow them to move elsewhere. So just as a final piece, and then we'll have a look at any questions that's come in. What I'm just going to do here is have a look at every requirement in the system. Normally those are jobs or roles, but they don't have to be. It could be a project. And here, what I'm able to do as an individual is look at every requirement and how I match it. So interestingly enough, it looks like Raphael actually would be a good candidate for a program director, but you can see there's some other roles here that are a reasonable match. And it might be, yeah, we need less program managers, but we really need somebody in the vendor relations. And at a 52% match, Raphael wouldn't be a bad choice. So that really is a quick run through of how to use data based on a consistent skill framework to make very, very informed decisions. So I'm going to hand back to John and see if we have any questions, John, that we'll pick up in the latter stages of this webinar.
Thank you very much, Paul. I always find something refreshing every time we review this topic. I do think, for what it's worth, that the same slide, or not slide, but report in our analytics tool about where do we have excess skills versus where do we have that gaps would be a powerful thing to throw on the screen here while I close up shop with a couple questions here. Same question that's been since the beginning of webinars. Will the slides be made available? They will be made available to anybody who attended or registered for the webinar. We'll be sending out a recording, all that jazz. The second question that I have here is quite interesting. It says, the screen you shared on all of the technology layoffs with the large tech companies in California brings to question of, does this have legal implications on, is there any, especially in a progressive state like California or, more progressive countries around the world, if we just let a bunch of people go, is there potential legal action to come back and say, I didn't deserve to be let go? And I can prove it to you that I didn't deserve to be let go, but, Tom stayed, I didn't. I have more skills than him. That's kind of what I gathered from the question that came in. Would love your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, certainly is the answer that I use the word defensible quite often. And of course, it depends on the jurisdiction that you're in. I know there's various laws in most of areas of the world, of course, that have employee protections. Making informed decisions based on good, solid data, in this case, of course, skills, is defensible. So from that point of view, it wasn't, that you were the last person that spoke to the boss and bought a coffee for them. It becomes a very, factual based decision point, and that's always a good place to be. So it certainly can play a role in that. Yeah, good question. Thanks, John. I'm just bringing up the analytics while we're chatting here, by the way. So
right on.
Any others?
Let me look through here. Do any of the training providers automatically map their courses to Sophia today?
Lots. Yeah. So I said I didn't want to turn this into a full demo. We were looking at it from the point of view of the the data and how it can be used. If we dig a little deeper, we could have seen that many training providers, I'm not going to mention them, it might sound like I've got favorites as well, but some of the big online e-learning providers have mapped all of their training to Sophia. What that means for an end user is if you use one of those providers, you can go straight from a skill gap to an action that will help you address that skill gap. So I have to say, I've actually spent the last couple of days in those types of conversations with training providers, not just higher education, but very specialist ones, looking at how the training aligns to the skills, because skills in Sophia is the language of the employer. So what a good place to be to have a training course or whatever that action is, maybe mentoring even, that directly relates to a skill that an employer would recognize. So
yeah, I was involved in a very similar conversation just last week as well, talking about the campus bookstore being broken down by Sophia skill instead of the way it is today. Right. Yeah. So if inside of every book it said, by reading this book, you're going to get this at level 5, this at level 6. So yeah, and then even, what if you walk into Barnes and Noble or your local bookstore, and instead of it being broken down by the way they do it currently, which is way more the old way, vendor specific technologies, but you walk in and say, punch into the thing, do your self-assessment, and it'll recommend all the books that you should take and walk out the door with. So, all right, that's it for now, Paul. I think that we could probably close up shop here. Keep the questions open here for another minute or two. Anybody has any questions?
And I actually had the analytics ready to load there, but I'm actually going to do something else because I've got a couple of giveaways for people that are attending. So let me just share a couple of slides at the end of my slideshow. And there we go. Just come back. Okay. So for anybody that wants to dig a little deeper into the Sophia framework, of course, for anyone that's using SkillsTX, we have a lot of online self-paced training available. So you've got a QR code there. By all means, the vast majority of that training is no cost. Only when you need a badge, there's a small fee. Get involved. So I've got that one and one other here. This is from an organizational perspective. So if you're having to think about this from the point of view of, I wonder how our organization does these things, We'll scan that QR code, around about 10 to 15 minutes of surveys relating to how your organization manages the digital skills. And you'll get around about 50 to 60 pages of advice and guidance, including a benchmark score against industry. So why not? Just a very quick way of getting a good understanding in terms of where you sit compared to what I was just describing.
Right on, and I'm going to throw it out there. I'm betting we don't have a QR code ready up to load here, but we've also created a Sophia cheat sheet. Sure, if you type Sophia cheat sheet and or SkillsTX into Google, you will get to a page. It's absolutely free. Don't need to enter your name or phone number or anything. Print it out, set it around your office. People will look at it. A great 4 or 5 page document that'll really help you understand more about what Sophia is and how it might work within your organization. With that, thank you for your time and attention. And you have yourself a wonderful day, night, evening, wherever you are in the world. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, John.